Yeah. All right. So I think you are all aware of this very tragic plane crash accident that happened in South Korea, where 179 people were killed and only two survived. Flight attendants were seated at the back, and they say that the accident was because of a bird being stuck in the engine or striking the engine or something like that. But they're investigating because they are trying to because usually planes are designed in such a way that they take into account that the bird may come and crash into its engine or windshield or wherever. And so the design is supposed to be bird strike proof. But they are still trying to investigate, because after a tragedy has happened, it's very important to for investigators to think about why it happened, what went wrong, and only then do they consider that the case is solved, that they have some sort of a closure, they can close the case. Similarly, we the people who families who suddenly lost their loved ones are they are all also eager, wanting to know what has happened. But right now they want some remains of their loved ones so they can bury them, or some pieces of cloth or stuff they used, because having that, till they don't have that, they will not have a sense of closure that truly my loved ones has passed away. That is much needed. Today we are going to look at this topic of closure. Closure, having closure. We are coming to the close of 2024, but have we received the closure that we need to transition from this year into the next year? A closure is a kind of resolution, where we can make sense of something that has happened, maybe a painful experience, and we can have some sort of rational understanding as to why it happened, or we can come to some conclusion, a completeness within our hearts or our mind, as to like a jigsaw puzzle requiring an explanation. We need to make sense of certain events that happen in our life: a personal failure, a loss of a loved one, a sudden end of a relationship, a painful experience, or a series of hardships we have gone through. And that's very important. We human beings, we need that. We wish for a closure, a sense of finality, so that we can finally move on. We can say that, okay, it's done. Now I can go on, get on with my life. Sometimes in when in we see that unless we have not really resolved our past, we have not really escaped it. We can be we can sometimes be like Lot's wife, who turned and looked back and she was frozen into a pillar of salt. Sometimes we can be frozen into our past forever, because some things, some tragedies, some events that have happened, they continue to haunt us. We continue to carry it forward. We can look at some of the instances of people seeking closure. We see that in Rizpah, in the case of Rizpah, was one of the concubines of Saul, and when seven of her sons, of their sons that are killed, descendants of Saul, she refuses to bury them, and that's a very symbolic for somebody seeking closure. The people are dead, but you're refusing to bury. You're refusing to bury the issue You're refusing to conduct its funeral. It has happened, the tragedy has happened, but you cannot bury it. You cannot bring yourself to let it go, to release it, to move forward. Job met with the tragedy, and his everything was gone. His sons and daughters were suddenly dead, and some time had passed, but he was still not having a closure. He needed some explanation in his mind as to why it happened, and none of what his friends told him made any sense. Yeah. Jacob, we see, was somebody who ran away from home abruptly, suddenly, of course, to his father and his brother, and he thought he had escaped his past. He thought he's moved forward, but there was no closure. He had not reconciled it. He had not owned up to the wrong that he had done. And finally, we see that he was once again, years afterwards, his past comes haunting back, and he's so scared to meet his brother Esau. So that's why closure is very, very important. Uh, you know, G- Jesus emphasizes this thing about closure when he says, if you are being taken to with by an adversary to a court, you better settle the matter quickly before you reach that final place where you stand before the judge and you may be thrown into prison, or you end up paying every last penny of it. So certain things in our life, they need to be resolved. There needs to be some sort of a closure. Otherwise, they'll suddenly explode into our life, or they will never let us go. It will always be something that we carry within ourselves. Symbolically speaking, the Israelites left Egypt, but for some of them, Egypt never left them, because they still carried that. They still had that sense of looking back, saying that was better. They were not completely set. They had not let it go. Yeah. Every now and then, I keep meeting sometimes young people who have been left by someone they loved abruptly in their relationship, and that really hurts them. It makes them think, how could this person suddenly leave me without any explanation in the relationship? And then they are sometimes frozen into that moment where they feel, even after years have passed, this person will return again, and they are stuck. They have not received any understanding and no closure to that. There are sometimes people who are stuck in the glory of the past. Like, they used to be very successful once upon a time, and they're still trying to recreate that same success years after that. Like, you may have seen this in the case of some film producers or actors trying to recreate that past glory. But they somehow they want to do that, but they have not really closed that okay, it's gone. It doesn't have to be the same way. Maybe I need to explore something else. They're still carrying that. They still want to live in that moment years after that. Yeah. It's sometimes people who have gone through rape and abuse or some sort of violence, they can carry even years after that thing has happened. And if it is not being processed well, if they know that they had nothing to do with it, it was, if they have not gone through counseling, or they have not received a proper spiritual understanding of it, they can still be victims of that past. They can still live in fear, or any small thing can still trigger and bring all those memories. They end up reliving that past, so there is no closure there for a terrible thing that has happened in their life. Uh, uh, you know, There are people also sometimes who are unable to trust anybody again, or similar kind of people. Sometimes they can't trust because of being rejected. They can't trust anybody else. They think this other person will also end up rejecting them, or sometimes they feel they need to reject that person before that person rejects them, or sometimes they try to grab onto that person because they think, just like that previous person left me, this person will leave me. So they will try to quickly rush into sealing that relationship, engagement, marriage, whatever. But they are actually moving from one unresolved issue into something else, and that's very dangerous because that could completely destroy their future, their life, all their plans, because they are still carrying the nightmare of the past into that. So, beloved, when during COVID, when people suddenly died, and many of us, we had no previous experience of something like this, and when we saw somebody in our own home, when people saw somebody in their own homes just having cough, and then within few hours this person is dead, and they couldn't believe. They thought, I mean, some medicine, home medication could work, and I thought it was no, and many were saying that, oh, I thought it was just normal, I just thought it was simple restlessness or some breathing. And oh, if only I had acted fast, if only I had known that this was going to take away my father, my mother, my brother. And so a lot of people lived in deep regret because it happened. People died so fast. So that's where there was a need for closure for many people who were left hanging this sudden tragedy that struck them. While closure is important for our life to move on, it's also possible that sometimes you cannot have have it in its completely. You can't really resolve certain things. Sometimes people have just passed away and you couldn't talk to them. You couldn't say, you couldn't apologize to them. You couldn't make it up to them. You couldn't go and tell someone about forgiving them and all. So there are sometimes complex situations people go through where closure is just not possible. And I think this is where we can be so thankful to God as Christians, as believers, that God comes to make sense of it. God is that one person who comes into that equation and makes those things, those situations complete. You know, it is said in Psalms 147 that God heals the brokenhearted. He binds up their wounds. God is a healer, and he will heal, but there is no such promise of instant healing there. Sometimes it may take time, and we have to hold on to the Lord. We have to look to the Lord and groan unto him and cry unto him as Job did, and then find some healing and comfort and solace to our souls. Closure also needs a sense of surrenderance. Jesus invites us to come, all those who are weary and burdened, come to me and talk to me. Share your burden with me. It is so important for us to, in this time uh, of this very busy life that we live in, to find time to rest, to find time to be still before the Lord, to ask the Lord to show us, our life, what needs to really be sorted, resolved. Is there something that I'm carrying? Is there a stress? Is there a worry that is haunting me? Is there a fear? Is there a wound of the past that needs to be resolved? Is there a broken relationship that I may have forgotten, but it is still affecting me because I have not closed it well. I have not resolved it well. Yeah, and it's we are often people who are we realize sometimes our tendency within us to be control freaks, where we want everything to go our way, we want our expectations to grow. We do not, yes, we have certain dark spots in our life, in our living, which where we need God to confront us, to show us that this needs, how long will this pattern be repeated into the new year? How long will you be this way? How long you will be fearful? How long will you be revengeful? How long will you refuse to trust me in this area? Why can't you hand it over? So there is some sort of closure needed there, where we need to once and for all settle those things and surrender it in the Lord's hands. Now, surrendering, can also, it's sometimes it is a kind of release, it is a kind of letting go. It may not necessarily mean forgetting, because sometimes we need to remember so that we don't get into the same situation again. But there is a healthy way of moving forward, where we have resolved it, where we have done what we need to. It's not that we, in the name of God, we do not do our part. We must go and make it up to the person. But we have resolved it in the Lord's. We have obeyed. We have done what we need to. We have surrendered it, and then we have surrendered it to the Lord, and we can then finally move forward. So closure is found in trusting God's sovereignty. Ultimately, He is sovereign. He knows everything. My life may not seem perfect. I might not seem to be getting anywhere, but in the end, my life is in His hands. He works for the good of all those who love Him and who are called according to His purpose. So it's very important for us to trust God, and not sometimes keep just blaming the past for the present situation. We do not have to be self-condemned when God has said there is no condemnation against you. He's resolved. Jesus says it is finished. Why are you leaving it unfinished? Why are you carrying it forward? It's so important for us to settle these things with the Lord. Closure is, so closure is also, once we have closed something, we can move on to new beginnings. Sometimes it can give us a new hope. We can see things we have not seen before, because we have finally let it go. We have finally closed that case. It can open a whole new world to us. New people, new relationships, new opportunities can come if we have moved forward, if we decide to move forward. It reminds me of Naomi and Ruth. When they move from that tragic space into a place, into a direction where she has heard God has visited Beth. New things, new beginnings come, isn't it? And then Boaz, whom she had completely forgotten about, starts coming. So it's so important for us to move forward, trusting in the Lord, and not be a victim of the past. Yeah. And therefore we must be willing to embrace new things that come our way, willing to not let the fear of our past hold us hostage. Be willing to step out of the boat, out of our comfort zone, talk to people, be confident, move, reach out. It's so important for us to do that, and finally, beloved, we know for a fact that our closure will sometimes just be in part. Sometimes we cannot expect to turn into super super Avengers, kind of superheroes. There will be those hurts and wounds, those scars we will carry. Even Jesus had scars, right? But it helps us to be more mature and stronger. We know for a fact that finally it is only God who will give us the ultimate closure. The fulfillment will come when Jesus will come, and He will wipe away our tear, our pain, our suffering. He will give the answers to those questions that have been troubling us for so long. And so we look forward to that, in a world that is hopeless, in a world where many people are still walking around hurt and in pain and burden. It is we who proclaim the gospel of hope, the gospel that can give closure to people. It's so essential for us to keep doing that. The God who understands your pain and suffering, and the Lord who will make everything beautiful in His time. It's so important to tell people that, isn't it? So we want to really ask you this evening: is there something in your life that needs closure? Because 2024 is closing, but have you received closure? In the last few hours, do you need to make that phone call with your brother or sister with whom you have been estranged for many years, and just wish them, at least send a message to them? Take a baby step in that direction, and the Spirit of God will lead you forward. Write down those things, and just, if it's been some bad thing that has happened, write it down and burn it away. Surrender it to the Lord. you know but move forward. May the Lord of hosts, may the God of new beginnings grant you closure. That is our prayer for you this evening. May God bless you all, and as we enter into the new year, let us let the Lord grant us release in our hearts and minds. Let it truly be a new year for us, not escaping from one situation into other, but resolving by finding closure in the Lord and moving forward with confidence. I wish you that kind of a new year. May God bless you all.